you been wanting to create a mosaic home accessory, but you weren't quite sure what or how to start? Then today's video is for you. We'll discuss how you can take a plain tray and turn it into a mosaic centerpiece for everyone, especially you, to enjoy. Let's get to it. Welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Julie, and on this channel we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. If you're into decor, then you know a mosaic tray is that extra special touch to your home. It's been quite a while since I made a mosaic tray, and I've got to say it has been weighing on me. It's one of those things I just want to do. Adding a mosaic touch to your coffee table, dining table, kitchen, or wherever you can dream up just feels good. And at the time of filming this video, we are in the Thanksgiving season here in the States, and I wanted to make something that I could put on the dining table that would work well with my everyday dishes, which is Fiesta ware. I wanted something that I could put flowers on, or the salt and pepper shakers on, or whatever I wanted, whether it was a special meal or just every day. And for the record, this tray will not be food safe. However, at the end of the video, we will be discussing ways that you can safeguard or try to protect the integrity of your mosaic in case it is going to be used near food or liquids. So in today's video, I'll share how I prepped the tesserae, tiled the substrate, and grouted. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. I found the perfect substrate for this project. It's a lightweight, somewhat dark stained wood tray with a low edge. And what I also like about it is that it has these low profile handles carved out of the sides. You don't really see them, but you can feel that they're there. If you're wanting to make a mosaic tray or shop for a mosaic tray, then you want to look for trays that are made out of materials like wood, metal, stone, and even plastic. These are all acceptable substrates in mosaic. For unfinished wood substrates, you definitely want to prep them before you begin tiling, and I've done a video all about that topic here on my channel. I'll include a link to that video down below in the description. Now you can access this information by clicking Show More underneath the video description. That's if you're on your desktop computer, and if you're on your tablet or your smartphone, you can click the down arrow to the right of the video title. The tray I'm going to be tiling on is stained, and so I'm not going to do anything to prep the substrate because basically it's already been done. But should you be using a painted tray as your substrate, you're going to want to prep the surface that you're going to be tiling on, and this can happen by scoring the area where you're going to be tiling, and the video that I just referenced will show you how to do that. But the reason you want to is because you want your adhesive to make contact with the actual substrate. It's going to strengthen the foundation and hold of your mosaic. For the tesserae, I'm using vitreous glass tile exclusively on this mosaic. So it's the 3/4 inch size to be exact, and that's for a few reasons. First, it's because I want to. Yep, I've been wanting to do something with vitreous glass tile, and I've also been wanting to do a tray like I mentioned earlier, so I brought both of my wishes together, basically. Do you ever get like that where you want to work with a particular type of tesserae or a particular substrate or color combination or design, and it haunts you until you do it? Well, basically, vitreous glass and a tray, they've been haunting me, and now I'm going to, take care of it. And the second reason is because this is a tray, and I want the surface level of the finished project to be level without having to think about it much while I'm tiling. I know, this sounds lazy, and maybe so, but I just want to work on a project that will allow me to tile and get fully lost in the process. All right, now it's time to tile, but before I could get started with the tiling, I first wanted to cut down the tiles. Using my wheeled glass nippers, I cut each 3/4 inch tile into 4, quote, equal pieces. I'm using air quotes around equal because I didn't measure as I cut. I eyeballed it. So they aren't perfectly equal, but I tried my best. This is somewhat mindless work, but necessary for the design, and it took me about a half hour to cut through all of these. Now, I could have used all stained glass, or all ceramic, or all porcelain, or even mix these materials to create a mixed media mosaic tray, but that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted easy and flowing. So I stuck with the 3/4 inch vitreous glass size exclusively and stayed away from the 3/8 inch and the 5/8 inch sizes. I found that those can be a little thicker than the 3/4 inch size. If you do create a mixed media tray, you'll want to check your tile levels as you move along in your design just to make sure you're keeping things consistent. So back to the vitreous tile. I chose the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Yes, I know it should be violet, but I'm calling it purple. And within each color group, I used a variety of shades, and this will add depth and interest to my overall design. I'll include a list down below in the description for everything that I used in today's video, including the tesserae and the adhesives and tools and grout or thin set, and of course the substrate, in case you'd like to make a mosaic tray of your own. So once all the tiles were cut, I was ready to get started with tiling. Now with a ruler, I measured to find the general area of the center of the substrate. The design I have in mind isn't an exact drawn out design, so I just needed to know round about the general area for the center. And I got started tiling with red vitreous in the center of the tray. The adhesive I'm using is Weilbacher. Other acceptable adhesives include thin set, tile adhesive, silicone, and epoxy sculpt. But the reason I chose Weilbacher is because it works well with the substrate and the tesserae, but also, going back to what I was saying earlier, I don't want to worry about if my tiling is staying even on the surface level. I'm starting with tesserae that are all the same thickness. So I'm at an advantage as far as keeping my surface area level because the tesserae are the same thickness and the adhesive is thin. Weilbacher adheres tesserae at pretty much the same level or thickness, if that makes sense. It doesn't add much bulk, or any bulk really, between the tesserae and the substrate. So the design or pattern I'm going by is very loose. I'm tiling in the center and going in the color order of the rainbow out to the edge of the substrate. So I started with red and continued into orange and then yellow and so on, into green and then blue and then finally purple. I'm keeping the grout line pretty tight or small. If you decide to tile a pattern like this, you can always draw lines on the substrate to use as a guide. I chose not to and just went with it. My lines of tesserae aren't perfect. My tiles that I cut aren't perfect either. So it would make sense that my lines aren't going to be perfect. And that's the look I want. I don't want it to look perfect. I also adhered the tesserae in a way that doesn't always match up the grout line to the tesserae next to it. And again, I'm good with that. I wanted those grout lines staggered horizontally and vertically. And some tesserae needed to be cut down even further in order to fit along the edges. And once I was done tiling, I let it dry thoroughly for at least 48 hours. So the tray has been sitting here for a few days and I gave it a little longer than normal to dry because the tiles are so close to each other and they're tiled down within an edge. So in other words, there's not much air circulating between the tesserae and the substrate. I wanted to give the mosaic ample time to dry so I could reduce the risk of dislodging a tessera during grouting, which of course we all know happens from time to time. And now it's time to grout. There is something I want to do first though to the substrate, since it has a finished stain on the surface, which I want to protect. So I'm going to tape it up using painter's tape. This will protect the substrate as I handle it with my grouty hands. It will keep the grout where it belongs, which is on the tiled surface and off of other areas that I don't want the grout to touch or scratch. So for instance, if you're planning to use a metal tray, you'll probably want to do this same thing to keep your tray from getting scratched. If you'll be using a lighter colored tray and dark grout, well, you might want to consider doing this as well. Surfaces like plastic or acrylic would also be susceptible to scratching. Sanded grout has the potential to scratch up your substrates because, well, it contains sand, hence the name. So I'm taping around the inside of the tray where the vitreous tile meets with the substrate, and then I'm taping up the rest of the tray as well. This allows me to just focus on grouting and not worrying about where my grouty hands have touched. Now I'm going to throw another curveball in here and say that I'm not actually using grout for the grout, but instead I'm using thin-set mortar. Thin-set is a cement-based adhesive. That's right, I'm grouting with thin-set. I'm starting with fortified gray thin-set and I'm coloring it to make it black. If you'd like to learn how to color or tint your grout and thin-set, I'll include a link to the video down below in the description. And in that video, I do demonstrate 3 ways that you can do this. So the reason I'm using thin-set is because I have a lot of it right now in the studio, but you can certainly use regular sanded grout, or if your grout lines are really small like they are in my project, you could even use unsanded grout. My grout has been sitting here for a few minutes and I'm ready to get started. It doesn't matter where on your tray that you start with your grouting. So I'll just spoon some on and I'll start rubbing the thin-set in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion, pushing it into the grout line. And I'll do this grouting process all over the surface area of the mosaic. Make sure you rub the grout along the line where your painter's tape is. Also, don't forget about the corners of your tray. Get into those corners really well. Sometimes a palette knife or wood craft stick works well for doing this. Now, because I used vitreous glass, which is pretty thin, I don't need to mix up a huge amount of thin-set. So once I'm done grouting, I'll leave it here to sit for 10 to 15 minutes before I clean it off. Okay, the tray's been sitting here and I can see that it's dried a little bit. So now I'm ready to clean off the thin-set. I'm going to remove the thin-set in the same way that I put it on by going in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. What I'm doing is cleaning off the extra thin-set or grout if that's what you choose to use, but I want to make sure that I'm careful not to remove what's in the grout line, only what's on the tile surface. Now obviously with such a small grout line, you don't want to remove what's in there. However, when grouting, we all know it's inevitable that you're going to remove some grout from the grout line as you clean, but you just want to be mindful not to dig in there. If you do and you realize you've removed too much, you can always start over and add more grout to the area in question and begin again. And that's why it's so important when you're grouting that you push the grout, or thin-set in my case, into the grout line. This gives the grout or thin-set something to hold on to and also gives your mosaic a stronger foundation. So I'll continue cleaning off the thin-set on the surface and then move on to the sides and the corners. The corners can be tricky for grout removal. I found that using a palette knife, craft stick, or even a toothpick work really well to get in there and remove what's hiding in the corner. You don't have to worry about the grout that's on the painter's tape because we're going to be removing that later. You just want to make sure that the grout line of where the tesserae meets the substrate is filled in. Once I feel like I've cleaned off the mosaic as best I can, I'll turn it over and try to get any of the crumbs off as I can, And I'll even use an old paintbrush or chip brush to help clean it up even more. Make sure your tiles are clean so you can avoid a grout or thin set haze. Before removing the tape, I also like to go over the tiles one more time to polish them up. This is also the ideal time to look for any holes in the grout line that you may have missed or accidentally cleaned out. It happens. If everything looks good, it's time to remove the tape. You don't want to keep your tape on there and let the grout or thin set dry, because the grout or thin set will dry to the tape, and then when you go to pull it off, you're going to have yourself a little situation there where the grout or thin set meets the tape. If everything looks good, it's time to remove the tape. Now, there's no real method to this except when I'm pulling the tape off of areas where it meets the grout line. I take my time and I go slow. If you pull the tape off and some grout comes off with it that should have stayed on your tray, then put a piece of painter's tape on the tray next to that area, reapply your grout, and go through the whole grouting process again. And if possible, I like to remove the tape with the substrate at an angle or upside down so that any grout crumbs don't fall on the mosaic I just cleaned. I do run an old paintbrush or chip brush over the mosaic area to get any more of the crumbs or dust off of it. Once the mosaic has been sitting for an hour or two, I like to go back over it to make sure a grout haze hasn't developed. And then once everything is nice and cured, a few days later, I like to go back over the tesserae and polish them up. Now, there's one last thing that you can do to help your mosaic and the longevity of it, especially if it's going to be near food stuff or liquids, and that is to seal the grout of your tray. I've done a video here on my channel all about how to seal your grout in mosaic work, and I will include a link to that video down below in the description so you can check it out. That could be a very important step depending on how you plan to use your tray. I'll include a list down below in the description for everything that I used in today's video, including the tesserae and the adhesives and tools and grout or thin set, and of course the substrate, in case you'd like to make a mosaic tray of your own. I don't know that I was looking at the camera when I was just talking, so let's do that again. It is so windy outside. I hope you guys can't hear the wind, but it's been super windy in Miami for like the last few days at least, but woo. What have I done a video on this channel about? Arr! For sure I was looking at the camera that time. Yeah, I'm gonna do that thing. Sounds good. Oh, I was going so good. I was doing so good. Come on, girl. Come on. Okay. I don't know. And I think we're done. I can't speak today. Oh, I said it! I said it! Yay! Okay, don't mind if I do. For more mosaic inspiration, check out one of these two videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!